Morning.
Morning.
Good to see everyone back. Record reflect we are back in session. Parties and council are present. It's good to see all council back. It's good to be a staff with us. Good to see him back. Apologize for moving around. There's another calendar that's done once a month that is a large calendar, and they use Department 1 for that calendar, so we kind of got pushed out for today. But we'll be back there this afternoon, I think. And record reflect we are back in session. Parties and council present, all members of our jury or alternates are present, and our witness, Special Bogdan, is back on the witness stand. And Mr. Malone, you may continue your examination.
Are you kidding me? It's Jim's turn, Your Honor.
No, I'm sorry, you can't switch it.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Did you get a chance to get the materials over the weekend, and you have your reports and so forth?
I have my reports, but
Okay.
I don't have everyone else's reports with me. So.
Okay, good. I had asked you some questions about Dan Kavanaugh indicating to you that he was in Hawaii. Do you recall those questions?
I do.
So the interview you did with Mr. Kavanaugh was September 20th, 2014, correct?
I believe so.
And you and Detective Hankey, I guess, went down to San Diego. Do I have that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, prior to that, in January, you authored a search warrant to get Mr. Kavanaugh's cell phone records.
Objection
Do you recall that?
relevance.
Overruled.
I did.
And so in January, when you authored that search warrant, you knew in September at least what your investigation had shown so far as to Mr. Kavanaugh's whereabouts and when he went to Hawaii, correct?
I'm not sure, that was kind of complex. In January, I knew in September what I was going to talk to him about.
Yes. Well, in January, you knew when Mr. Kavanaugh had actually gone to Hawaii, correct?
Correct. Well, based off of the cell phone records, correct.
Okay. We take a look at your search warrant, see if this refreshes your recollection.
Your Honor, I'm going to object as irrelevance and violates the court's previous evidentiary ruling.
Sustained. Council approach with the recorder. Mr. Lane, you may continue form 1 to the court's ruling.
Thank you. When you authored the search warrant in January of 2014, you had a question as to the dates that Mr. Kavanaugh was actually in Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall? Well, do you know what your issue was?
Objection relevance.
Sustained.
Did you do anything after you authored the search warrant to confirm the dates that Mr. Kavanaugh was in Hawaii?
I believe Detective Avila did. He followed up with Hawaiian Airlines, I believe it was, to try to confirm the dates that Mr. Kavanaugh traveled.
And was that what Detective Avila did? Now, he was the case agent prior to you, is that correct?
Correct.
And so we heard testimony about the homicide detail kind of getting together and discussing what needs to be done and so forth as a group. Is that what was going on at the time?
At the time, we were still functioning as a team, so we were still taking other calls and working on other investigations. So we weren't solely focused on working this investigation. I'm sure we probably did have meetings and discuss stuff. At the time that I authored the warrant for Mr. Kavanaugh's phone records, I authored numerous warrants for other people's phone records to try and get kind of a baseline for anybody that we could see if we could provide alibis for, or getting investigative leads for.
So when Mr. Kavanaugh indicated he was in Hawaii, that would be an alibi, right? That he was saying, I'm in Hawaii, at least at the beginning of February, so I'm not around, and so your job, or as part of the homicide detail, would be to verify that or not, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And when you indicated previously you had questions about the dates that he had provided earlier, correct?
Objection, that misstates his testimony.
16,
You had questions about the dates.
We were trying to verify the dates that Kavanaugh was in Hawaii, correct?
So, after you authored the search warrant in January of 2014, and you said Detective Avila followed up, is that correct?
Yes.
And was that something that you guys discussed as a group?
I don't know that we necessarily discussed it as a group. There was follow-up that Detective Avila did to try and verify the dates that he traveled.
And Detective Avila, well, the information you put in the affidavit would be from Detective Avila, correct?
Not necessarily. It would have been, yeah, it would have been something that I either obtained from him or something that was discussed at some point.
Okay, so again, my question would be, what he was able to do or not do with his follow-up would be something that you would have discussed, correct?
More than likely.
So, other than checking with Detective Avila, what else did you do to confirm Mr. Kavanaugh's alibi?
Are you talking later after we interviewed him?
Whenever.
We followed up with Laura Knowles, who was the female that he was in Hawaii with,
And you mentioned that on Friday, right?
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yes.
Okay. But did you ask her for any boarding passes or plane tickets or anything like that?
Objection, asked and answered on Thursday.
overruled.
You'd have to talk to Detective Hankey about that. He was the one that interviewed her.
Okay. Well, you're the case agent. Did you ever come across a ticket or a boarding pass or anything like that?
Not to my knowledge.
And you yourself never contacted any airline or any airport authority or the TSA or anything like that?
I did not.
So, Lauren Knowles' girlfriend, anything else that you did to check the alibi?
Obtained his phone records.
Okay. Now, again, I asked you on Thursday, what is it about his phone records that would provide an alibi for him?
Based on the fact that he says he's there, his phone records indicate that he's calling local establishments there in Hawaii, along with Lauren Knowles' statement and photographs that she provided. We were pretty confident that he was in Hawaii at the time that the McStays went missing.
So his phone records show calls to Hawaii numbers, is that what you're saying?
I believe so, yes.
So would that require Mr. Kavanaugh to be in Hawaii to make calls to Hawaii numbers?
He asked me that on Thursday. I said no, it wouldn't.
Okay. So other than check his phone records, did you do anything else?
Not that I can recall offhand, no.
Okay. Now, at the time that and I actually misspoke on Thursday. I had asked you about a family member during the interview of Mr. Kavanaugh's. It was, in going through the transcripts, it wasn't a family member, but it was a person that, the name of Larry Haynes. Does that ring a bell?
I believe that's the name that Kavanaugh said that they stayed with out there, correct?
And did you ever contact him?
I personally did not. I don't recall if other detectives did or not.
At the time you interviewed Mr. Kavanaugh in September of 2014, you were aware of the fact that Joseph had owned Earth Inspired Products, correct? That was his company?
Yes.
And during the interview with Mr. Kavanaugh, he indicated to you,
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
do you know whether or not the subject of selling EIP came up during your interview?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Overruled, Nancy.
I'm not sure if we, I'm sure we probably talked to him about the status of the business after the McStays went missing.
If I showed you a transcript, would that refresh your recollection?
Objection, relevance, calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Would that refresh your recollection?
Probably, if I listened to the audio, it would be better, but
We're having a little technical difficulties, so that's the best we can do. Take a look at the bottom of, let's see, 191, and again, feel free to look before or after.
okay.
Does that refresh your memory?
Yes, sir.
So the topic of Mr. Kavanaugh selling the company, did that come up in your interview?
It did.
Now, since you had information, since you knew that that was Joseph's company at the time that you interviewed Mr. Kavanaugh, did you ever confront Mr. Kavanaugh in this interview and say, how the heck did you sell Joseph's company
Objection,
without his permission?
relevance, argumentative.
Sustained as phrase.
Did you ever ask Mr. Kavanaugh, how was it that he was able to sell Joseph's company without Joseph's or his family's permission?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled. Answer yes or no.
Based on the information that's in there, at that portion of there, it didn't look like we confronted him regarding that. There were a lot of questions, obviously, because we had never talked to Mr. Kavanaugh before. So without speaking to Mr. Kavanaugh at that point, we still hadn't even spoke to Mr. Merrick. So Mr. Kavanaugh obviously provided information that Merrick deleted the accounts also that he felt was concerning.
Objection, not responsive, move to strike.
Overruled. Answer no.
So, You didn't confront him, at least in what you're looking at in the transcript, correct?
In the portions of the transcript that are reviewed, no.
And do you recall ever going back after September 20th at any time and asking Mr. Kavanaugh, how is it that you were able to sell EIP without Joseph's permission or his estate's permission?
Objection, relevance, and argumentative.
Overruled.
I didn't re-interview Mr. Kavanaugh after that.
Did anyone in the homicide detail interview him on that subject?
Detective Henke may have done some follow-up talk with him. He was the one who kept in communication with Kavanaugh for any additional information that we needed, but I wasn't part of the interviews on that.
Are you aware of any such questioning of Mr. Kavanaugh as the case agent in this case?
Objection, lacks foundation based on his previous answer.
Overruled. You can answer yes or no.
I don't believe so. I think we looked into the folks that he talked about selling the business to.
I had asked you on Thursday about whether or not you reviewed Mr. Kavanaugh's PayPal records. Do you recall me asking you that?
Yes.
And you didn't recall? Did you get a chance to review your records and see whether or not you were able to, during the course of your investigation, ever review Mr. Kavanaugh's PayPal records?
No, I didn't.
Now,
No, you didn't check your records, or no, you didn't review them previously.
No, I didn't check the records to look into Mr. Kavanaugh's, to look at the follow-up that was conducted on Kavanaugh's stuff.
Okay.
I personally didn't conduct any follow-up into the PayPal records for Kavanaugh.
okay, so, just to be clear, you, as the case agent or a member of the homicide detail, never requested Mr. Kavanaugh's PayPal records. Is that accurate?
Me as the case agent, never what, I'm sorry?
Never either requested the PayPal records or know of any other person in the homicide detail that would have requested Dan Kavanaugh's PayPal records?
Objection, it's compound, and the second part calls for
Sustained
hearsay.
as compound.
Did you ever request Dan Kavanaugh's PayPal records at any time?
The PayPal records, I believe, were looked into. Part of the stuff that you're asking to go over is 80,000 pages of discovery. So I haven't looked through every piece over the weekend of everything. The PayPal records, I believe, were looked into. I'm not all that familiar with it, but I'm sure there were detectives that could come up and testify to that.
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
The topic of PayPal records and PayPal withdrawals came up during your interview with Mr. Kavanaugh, correct?
It did.
And actually, Mr. Kavanaugh told you an amount.
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Did you ask, or Detective Henke asked, while you were sitting next to him, how much money did Dan Kavanaugh withdraw from Joseph's PayPal
Objection,
account?
relevance, which leads to hearsay.
Overruled. You can answer yes or no.
At which point are you asking when did he withdraw the money?
At any time prior to your interview. So, from 2010 to September of 2014.
I think he said he had taken, again, without listening to the audio from the interview, I didn't prepare the report with regard to his interview.
Is it that you don't remember?
I know he said he did take money out of the accounts. He had never personally offered a check or signed Joseph's name. I recall him saying that, but I don't remember an actual figure of the amount that he withdrew from the account.
I'm going to show you page 221 of that same transcript. Take a look at that. Again, feel free to look before and after the meeting. Line 18, but you can look anywhere you want.
So you said it could be anywhere between,
Objection,
Objection, hearsay.
Your approach.
Sustained.
Maybe approach, Your Honor.
No, so he did give you a figure, is that correct?
he did.
Okay.
The figure that he gave you, you knew that it was incorrect, didn't you?
Objection, lacks foundation.
Overruled, the answer is. Overruled, the answer.
We knew that it was incorrect.
Correct.
How so? I'm not sure that I follow.
You knew that.
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Overruled, the answer.
You knew the amount that he told you he took from PayPal, from Joseph's PayPal account, was not correct.
Objection,
Right?
assumes facts, not evidence, and lacks foundation based on his
Overruled,
previous
you can
answers.
answer whether or not that was their belief or understanding at the time.
At the time, sir, I don't know if we knew exactly how much money was withdrawn from the account. I know we had financial records back, but again, as I sit here today, I don't recall how much money we knew was taken out of the account at that time.
Well, you had Joseph's PayPal records, correct?
Yes,
And did you ever verify the amount that Mr. Kavanaugh told you he took and just match it against Joseph's PayPal records?
I'm sure we did. Again, the focus of the PayPal portion of the investigation wasn't something that I was responsible for. We split different portions of the investigation up. Part of the PayPal records, there was a detective that could testify as to what they looked into with that. But just because I was the case agent doesn't mean I was completely savvy on everything every little nook and cranny of the case.
What about the times that Mr. Kavanaugh accessed Joseph's PayPal records after the family disappeared? Would that be important as part of the investigation?
Yeah,
So do you know when Mr. Kavanaugh first accessed Joseph's PayPal account to
We object,
withdraw
lack
money?
of foundation based on his previous answer that he is not familiar with this line of inquiry.
Overruled, the answer.
can you say the question again, sir?
Yes. Do you know when it was that Mr. Kavanaugh accessed Joseph's PayPal account
Not right now, I don't know.
in relationship to the disappearance of the McStay family?
I believe it was within, I think, a week after they went missing.
Did you ever confront him about the timing of his withdrawals from PayPal?
Again, without listening to his interview or reviewing it, I don't know exactly what we confronted him. I know we spoke with him for at least a couple hours. And I know we did address a lot of the issues there, but I'm not all that sad. I didn't listen to the audio from the recording or from the interview.
Since you reviewed the PayPal records, you would know whether or not Mr. Kavanaugh had ever gone into Joseph's PayPal records to withdraw money. You would know that,
Objection,
right?
calls for speculation, lacks foundation. He said he didn't review the records.
Sustained.
I thought you indicated you reviewed Joseph's PayPal records.
I know we had the records at the time. I don't know that I personally went through his records.
Did you ever approach the subject of Dan being bought out by Joseph?
Yeah, we did ask him about that.
Isn't it true that Mr. Kavanaugh indicated...
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
No.
Do you know what Mr. Kavanaugh, based on your interview, do you know what how Mr. Kavanaugh felt about the buyout?
Objection, calls for hearsay.
Objection sustained is calling for speculation and conclusion. As well as hearsay.
Goes to the state of mind.
Objection sustained.
did Dan Kavanaugh have animosity towards Joseph McStay regarding the custom business he was doing with Chase?
Objection calls for speculation and hearsay.
Matter at this point, we're gonna have to do our recording, but we're gonna have to get some guidance from the court and also set up our.
Your Honor, I believe this has the 356 issue that the court ruled on Friday or Thursday. So this hasn't clearly been settled. Yet we're attempting to comment in front of the jury about it.
I agree, so,
So I have, I prepared the,
Your Honor, may we maybe
Sure.
approach?
counsel approach with the recorder. Okay, apparently there's, some materials that I need to review before we get to the next portion of the testimony. That's going to take a little bit of time. So rather than keep you waiting, I'm gonna go ahead and, basically, as far as you're concerned, take our new recess, have you come back at 1:30. And I should be able to finish reviewing all of that material by then, and we'll see where we are at that point. Okay, keep in mind the admonitions previously given to you, not to form or express any opinions about the case, not to discuss the case or allow anyone to discuss the case with you or in your presence. Again, that means not discussing anything about the case, witnesses, testimony, exhibits, parties, or attorneys. Questions?
Yes. Are we gonna be here in the afternoon?
Good question. I think we're gonna be back in 1, right?
Your Honor, the witness isn't available this afternoon.
I'm sorry?
The witness is not available this afternoon.
At all this afternoon?
No, sir.
Okay.
There will be another witness here at the defense's request.
do the people have any redirect examination of the areas that have already been covered?
Cross-exam?
I'm sorry, cross exam.
Likely very little.
I don't have any, if Mr. Dougherty has some.
Mr. Rhymes made a face, so I don't know. I
Okay.
don't think
Okay, okay, we'll be back at 1:30, we can still do that.
Judge,
Okay,
Judge, Department 1 called us and said they're having issues with Elmo down there, so it may not be working.
okay, so I guess come here first and we'll figure out if we're gonna be here or in, Department 1. Also, on Thursday, a couple of jurors asked if it would be possible for the jury to actually see the truck that Mr. Barrett owned back in 2010. And the answer is yes, we think that is possible, and we're working on trying to arrange that. So maybe this week or next week, we'll get that here and bring you down to the parking lot or the garage and have you have a chance to see the truck and the lights and all of that. Okay? So we'll see you, everyone back at 1:30 and we'll see what the department brings. Okay? Are you available tomorrow?
I can't be sure.
Okay. Just one second, I think Mr. you wanted to say something.
In
Yes.
chambers. In chambers.
Oh, sure. Okay.
No, that's an ex parte request.
Regarding, okay, okay. The reporter, yes?
Yes.
Sure. All right, I'll see, defense counsel and chambers, reporter. And then you're looking for the transcript of the 2 minutes, so, okay,
Oh, I'm looking for an exhibit? Is that what I'm looking for?
I think so.
Yes, 946A,
That's the transcript of the,
what we played.
right, okay, very good.